Welcome to Chess, ladies and gentlemen. All right, man, I appreciate you guys very much for stopping by, as always. So you guys know, man, we got the American Cup 2025 rolling. So I got the game Wesley versus Abhimanyu Mishra. And this is round number 3. And we have a Sicilian on the board. So I will, let you guys know that from jump. Sicilian, very famous chess opening in all of chess history, as always. I was able to get the picture of the game that they actually played. So hooray for that. Anybody who is coming from the Philippines, I will say maraming salamat. Mabuhay to you. Appreciate you guys very much for stopping by. But if you guys are ready to go, man, without any further ado, let's take a look and see what we got for this game, son. All right, man, so we got the move e4. Like I said, we do have a Sicilian defense on the board. We do get into a Najdorf, which some of you guys might have heard of it. Some of you guys might not have. It's a pretty famous opening. We do see knight f3. We got d6, d4, and this is the most standard way to get to the Sicilian Najdorf. We got pawn taking, knight f6. We got knight c3. We got a6. Nothing to see here so far, but this is the Najdorf. It is one of the most well-known openings in all of chess. And we do see the move bishop e3, which is the absolute top move. Sometimes, people can go f3, they go queen d2, castle long, and kind of try to start flinging pawns forward this way type deal. That is one of the options. That's kind of one of the ideas behind bishop to e3. It doesn't always have to be that way. This is absolutely one of the best squares for this bishop to go on. This square and this bishop going to this square. It is one of the strongest places that you can place that bishop. This bishop here type stuff. We do see the move e5. We got knight going back to f3. Now, something to be said about that. Some of you guys might have noticed. Okay, wait a minute. Pushing e5, doesn't that weaken the d6 pawn? It does, but the argument for Sicilian players are basically saying that I just displaced a well-placed knight. This knight is really, really strong in the center of the board, so you are kind of giving a little bit positionally to just get this knight out of that really, really nice square. So we see e5, knight going to f3. So we did manage to knock white back just a little bit. We do see bishop going to e7. We got bishop to c4. Now, the nature of the structure that you've given yourself as black is making this a backward pawn. So black's main goal is to, number one, try to weaken e4 with, b5s and b4s and things like that. But it is also to push this move d5. If black can push d5, then they are a-okay. Everything is good. Let me put this down just a little bit. Yeah, cool. Sweet. Yes. So this is definitely something that they want to try to do just to kind of free their position up just a little bit. It does make this bishop just a little bit better. We do see castles by black. We got the move bishop back to b3. Now, this wasn't a move that you absolutely had to make, but, you do have sometimes, black wants to go b5 and b4 and knock these two pieces away, and this e4 pawn can get a little bit shaky. This is definitely one of, black's targets on that side. So bishop to b3, just make sure that if we do see a b5, we still have time to, protect e4 with like maybe something like this or, stuff like that. We do see bishop back to b3. We got bishop going to e6. Like I said, bishop to e6, bishop to e3 are the strongest positions for these bishops right here. So this bishop is just contesting this bishop. Also, this bishop is influencing this square, so it is making d5 very hard for black to play. So ideally, black would try to, relieve some of the influence on this square and push d5, right? Correct. Good guess, guys. We do see castles by white. We got knight going to c6. We do see bishop going to g5. Now, this might kind of look weird because you're like, wait a minute, like bishop to e3 and then bishop to g5 later. But this does very heavily influence d5. So you can see right now that both players are basically like really, really struggling to fight for this square. We got the knight here, the bishop here. We got this knight here, this bishop here. The queen is behind this pawn. So one of the ways that you can try to further restrict d5 is by just threatening to capture bishop takes f6. And then it basically will make d5 dead in the water. We do see knight going back to d7. We got bishop taking d7, queen taking e7, and then we do see the move knight to d5. Now, You haven't seen black trade this bishop for this bishop because this is a really, really strong piece in the black position. So ideally, you don't just want to go off trading it. So, you know, we're trying to keep this bishop on the board. But we kind of do have a lot of threats right here with this knight. You also have the ability maybe at some point to go knight to b6, hit this rook type stuff. So it is better in this position to go bishop taking b5. But this is a very reluctant capture. We do see queen going to d5. Maybe if black falls asleep, move this rook away, move this queen away. Maybe we can go check here, and we are pressuring black quite a bit. But we don't see that. We see knight to f6. Not only does that hit the queen, but it also hits this e4 pawn, as always, like I was saying. The queen settles back to d3, making sure to keep an eye on this pawn right here. We got knight going to a5, and then knight goes to d2, and this is protecting. Not only is it protecting e4, but it is also, you know, in case knight takes, we got the knight taking, and our structure is preserved. We do see rook a to c8. If you know anybody who plays the Sicilian defense and does not play rook a to c8 or rook f to c8, you got to talk to them and let them know that that is one of their ideas. So start playing it. And if you don't play it in your own game, start playing it on me. We do see knight going to c4. Knight takes. We got bishop taking. The rook goes down to c6, possibly trying to double on the c file. We do see rook f to d1. And white is definitely trying to always keep an eye on this weak point. You see it coming up in the entirety of the game where white is always trying to kind of tickle this pawn and let black know that I see your weakness. So I'm going to tie you down to it. So we do see rook going over to d8, protecting that point. Bishop goes back to b3. And not only is this a good diagonal for this bishop to be on, it is tethered to this pawn and just kind of keeping things safe. You know, even if you double rooks, they don't really have a great influence on this, you know, file because this bishop is holding this pawn right here. You don't want to trade a rook for a bishop. Sometimes when you are castling queenside, this can become a really defensive piece as well. Sometimes you see a knight on b3, stuff like that. We do see queen sliding over to c7, making sure we keep connection with d6. We do see queen going down to e2. The queen goes to b6. We got rook up to d3. Rook goes to c7. We see rook a to d1. And like I said before, you are always seeing white making sure that they are just constantly pressuring this point. You do not want black to get free in their position and just start moving pieces and just be really strong. So this is definitely a good idea to try to, you know, tie black down to the protection of this pawn. So that is the price you pay for going an early or even like a somewhat later e5 is you do greatly weaken this d6 point. But I mean, Sicilian players know this, so they have probably prepared for that. We do see queen going over to c6. We got the move c3 as if we needed more protection on that diagonal. We do see rook c to d7. We got bishop going to d5, plugging that hole up. We got knight taking, and then we do see rook taking. It's not that it's impossible to take with the pawn, but everything that you've been working for to try to build up pressure on this d6 point kind of a little bit goes out the window if you capture here and close everything up. You kind of give black a little bit of what they want. So go ahead and keep the weakness, go rook takes d5, and you still have a lot of pressure on this point. You see that black is basically just kind of just defending all of that. We do see the move b5. We got h4. We see h6. We got the rook 1 to d3. We got the rook over to e7. Everything for the most part right now is tied down with these two pieces. So this rook has a little bit of flexibility. Also, some possible ideas are maybe f5, trying to break things up so that you can continue to push that pawn, make it dynamic. But we do see the move h5, just kind of freezing everything on the king side, trying to make it really, really undesirable for this pawn to move right here. We do see rook going to e6. We got queen going to g4. Now you kind of see what h5 was doing. You really are trying to make it very inconvenient for black to push these pawns without some type of, you know, breaking apart in front of their king. We do see the rook possibly sliding over here to g3 soon. We got queen going to e8, and then we do see that rook to g3 like I was saying before. Why not, bro? I mean, anytime you can threaten a checkmate, I mean, sometimes maybe if the person is going to checkmate you before you threaten checkmate, maybe it might be bad. But I mean, usually it's a situation where you do put an insane amount of pressure on your opponent if you do threaten checkmate. And I mean, you never know. Maybe black, maybe Mishra doesn't see it. And he's like, hey, I'm going to go on my own attack. And he moves a pawn or does something over here. And then you can just checkmate. You never know, man. Sometimes you get lucky. We got the move G6, pawn takes. We got pawn taking. Then we do see queen going down to D1. The king goes to G7. And then we see rook G to D3. And this is what is known as Aliekin's gun. For those of you who are not aware, this is a version of it. But basically the gist of it is two rooks on like a half open or open file, or pretty much against the target, and then you kind of line the queen up at the very back of all of that. You definitely don't want the queen to be in front of the rooks. You want you know, these rooks to basically be supported and pushed by the queen. So now you have maximum pressure on this D6 point. You really don't want to let this drop, because then it's a possibility that this A6 pawn will drop, and you have a lot of pressure over here too. So you got to defend this. So we do see queen going back to C6. But you can see that this is actually quite passive, you know, for black. And if you ever get in a situation where this rook moves, you definitely have the option of going rook takes E5, and you are kind of pinned along this file. We got queen going to G4, queen going back to E8, protecting the rook on E6 as it was lonely. We do see the move G3, and I mean, we don't want to repeat the situation, because, you know, white is actually in a pretty good position, so we don't really just want to draw. No draws over here, homie. Queen goes to E7. We do see queen going back down to D1 and Aliekin's gun. We got the move A5, and then we see A4. And you see that even though you have queen to D1 and you are kind of like putting a lot of pressure on black, D1 is actually one of the most useful squares for this queen to actually be on, even though it's way back in the back. We got pawn taking A4, queen taking A4. And so like I said, I mean, you see the queen on D1 served a lot of purposes. So we still are maintaining a lot of pressure on D6, but now we are tickling this pawn right here. And you don't ideally want to just move the rook over and kind of make it passive. You got queen C6 type stuff coming, adding pressure here and also hitting that rook in the corner. So we do see queen going over to A7. We got the rook going over to F3, rook to F8. When you have your opponent is putting a lot of pressure on you, usually it's a good idea to try to trade pieces, namely queens, to try to get some of the pressure off yourself. Also, you know, white is taking over this file right here, so you really just don't want to give them a file for free. So we do see rook taking F8, king taking F8, and then we have queen up to C6. Like I said, as you've seen Wesley So make these moves that he's pretty much been making all day, he recognized that after the move E5, D6 was always going to be a forever weakness. And it's something that you always want to keep a weakness and try to constantly attack. So you see that all of white's movements have been trying to kind of open up stuff over here, but have always kind of come back around to that weakness. So if you're playing your games and you notice that your opponent has a weak piece, a weak pawn, a weak square, you want to note that and possibly be trying to, you know, kind of constantly harp on that and put your opponent in passive positions, and you can win some games. We do see we're going over to F6. Now, you can't be so caught up like you're about to win a pawn that you drop this right here. So you have to be making sure that you take the time to notice the threat of your opponent and make sure you come back and defend. So we do see rook going to D2. Like I said, can't forget to defend on. The king goes over to G7. We see the move B4. Ideally, we do not let this pawn just kind of start advancing. If it does, it has the possibility of breaking up this structure. And we don't want our structure weak. We want black to have the weak structure by themselves. So we do see the move G5. We got C4. H4, we do see the move C5. And we have now just blocked this diagonal that this queen was trying to operate on. Because after pawn takes, I mean, you are going to be exposed on that diagonal. And we are possibly trying to go pawn takes. Well, not in this position here. But at some point, maybe pawn takes, and we do have a completely passed pawn. It can be significant. You never know. So we do see pawn taking G3. We got a rook taking D6, getting rid of that pawn, giving us some passed pawns over here on the queen side. We do see pawn taking F2 with check, and you can't really move anywhere other than F1, because if you do like something like this, you just got the queen promoting, and it's like, what are we doing? So you have to blockade the pawn with your king F1. We do see rook taking D6, queen taking D6. We got queen going over to F7, making sure that we hold this pawn. And this king absolutely cannot move anywhere. Of course, it can't move here anyway, but we do not want it to be moving right there. So we got queen to E5 with check. The king goes down to G6. We do see queen to D6 with check. The king goes to H5. We got queen checking on D1. And I mean, it might kind of seem like these checks are just like, for what? What are you checking for? But sometimes you can check somebody into like a bad position. Sometimes they're repeating. They don't want to keep repeating. So they move like to a bad square. And you could just win the game. So you never know what you can get from some checks. And to be careful, it might be tempting. You might be kind of thinking, okay, well, I went here. I checked the king away. Can't I just win a pawn? Well, if you go over here trying to win a pawn, you would actually be pretty much kind of drawing the game. At best, you would be allowing black to start connecting these pawns. Once these pawns can be connected, they basically take care of themselves. That's part of in-game knowledge that we build up when you study your in-games. So after we do see king going down to h4, we got king going up to g2. And then we have the move queen to a2, but unfortunately this blunders the entire game. If you want to go ahead and pause the video and try to see what move Wesley So needs to play in this position, go ahead and do so. All right, homie. So there was a very specific reason why Wesley So went king to g2 earlier. He was trying to clear this rank up for this queen to slide over and place a check on the king. One thing you should notice in this position, I mean both positions, is if you can place a check here, it basically forces the king over here. There's no other moves to be made, and you can continue to make forcing moves, which is something that from a short perspective, Wesley So is calculated pretty quickly. And we go into this right here. Queen to h1 with check. We got king moving over to g4. The queen goes up to h3 with check. And this is basically a tactics puzzle, homie. You see these a lot when you do tactics. Either checkmating because you have the pawn like back here and it's just checkmate, or you're just really forcing the king into a position it doesn't want to be in. We got king to f4. We got queen to f3 with check. King goes to e5. We got the queen going up to f5 with check. The king goes down to d4. And because you have this passed pawn right here, and the king has to stay in the vicinity of it, you have this really beautiful move here, and this is queen takes f2 check, and this is checking the king and forcing a trade of the queens. Obviously, you can't just move the king anywhere because the queen is going to drop, and that's the end of the game. So we do see the trade of queens right here, and then we do see king to e5. Now, it might look kind of tempting. You're like, hey, bro, I'm just going to go ahead and do this. But as in games, this pawn is going to just basically promote, and there's nothing stopping it because now this king is outside of the square of that pawn. So we do see king going to e5, trying to maintain the positioning. But, I mean, this is already mating anyway. It doesn't really matter. We do see Wesley So go king to f3. And it is in this position that Mishra resigns the game. Now, basically, you're resigning the game because you really don't have a whole lot of options. You can always just throw this pawn away, and you're going to see this here. But you are giving Wesley So a completely outside pass pawn, and that is just much better for him. And you really can't do anything here. Even if you force it, like waste this pawn and the king takes, the issue is you still cannot capture this pawn on e4. Because the C pawn is just going to run and score a touchdown. So you're really kind of in a situation right here where, you know, you're in Zugzwang and you really don't want to make any moves if you're black, but you can't because you can't pass the move. So that is that game. So we're trying to get Wesley So back into the, you know, winner's bracket if he can do it. So I appreciate you guys very much. Maraming salamat the king makaibigan. Post na nunod inga king my video. Mabuting pagbati to you, and I'll see everybody next time.